Hello out there. Once again, it is time for cross-cultural experiences where we talk to people, who have migrated from one culture to another, now sharing their unique experiences. And more importantly, letting us know what they learned from that experience. And today, my guest originally comes from Egypt, but she's now in the UAE. So kindly introduce yourself, Noha.
Okay, my name is Noha Mellor. I'm a native Egyptian who grew up in Cairo, but I left it like 30 years ago. Initially, I moved to Denmark, where I lived for 10 years. Then I relocated to the UK and spent around 18 years in London. And for the past 2 years, I've been living and working in the UAE. So UAE is an Arab country, and I grew up in an Arab country, so it's pretty close in terms of language and culture. But obviously, the 28 years I spent in Denmark and the UK were so different from where I
Correct.
grew up.
So we're now talking about four places. Your native Egypt, the U.S.
Egypt, Denmark, UK, and UAE.
Okay, so you're full of experiences. I want to believe. All right. What do you do at UAE?
I teach media. I'm a professor in media and communication here at the University of Sharjah.
Okay, that's wonderful. So let's get on to one of those experiences. Tell us where it happened and what was it, and what, more importantly, what did you learn from it?
Yeah, well, I have first to say that reflecting on cross-cultural experiences after
Mm.
living abroad for 30 years is a little bit challenging. Maybe it sounds contradictory, but after you live for decades in my case, on three different continents, Africa, Europe, and now Asia. But as time passes, you begin to internalize certain norms, making them feel like familiar rather than odd or unusual. So when you ask me to reflect on one or two cultural experiences, I start thinking of my first couple of years in Denmark when I had just arrived like 30 years ago. At that time, my Danish friends used to ask me about what caused my cultural shock, assuming it has something to do with gender, like how women dressed or
Yeah.
the way people expressed affection in public. But those aspects did not surprise me at all. Maybe thanks to Hollywood movies, which acquainted many of my generation with such scenes.
Okay.
What really astonished me with completely other things that seem quite ordinary to the Danes. So one experience has to do with space. When I first moved from Egypt to Denmark 30 years ago, I recall kind of stepping onto the street of my home, and I felt a sense of discomfort, unlike the bustling street of Cairo, where
Of Cairo.
the
Okay.
crowd seemed like a protective barrier. The quietness of Danish streets often left me feeling kind of exposed. In Cairo, I was raised with the belief that safety was supported by the kind of presence of many people around you, especially that I'm a woman. So this kind of hustle and bustle of the city was not just part of the life in Cairo, it was also reassuring and giving a sense of security for women in particular. So the
Okay.
thought of walking alone in a kind of sparsely populated area in Denmark was unsettling because it
How
made me
did you
feel
cope? How did you
exposed.
cope?
Yeah, it made me feel first like exposed to, I felt like, is it danger? Is it,
Okay.
am I exposed to danger somehow? But because the streets were often empty and it took me some time to adjust to this new reality. So at first it felt like kind of a sense of anxiety when I was out.
Oh,
Uh, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I should be on high alert. But over time, I began to appreciate this quieter environment. And the less crowded spaces offered a different kind of safety, actually. Kind of a different feeling that allowed for introspection, connection with nature, which is very valued for many Danes. So gradually, I embraced this serene lifestyle in Denmark, and I start thinking of the kind of the absence of chaos is not a threat. Actually, it's comforting.
All right. So if you were to go back to Cairo today, would you reverse that feeling?
It's horrible. I mean, I went only a few times in the past 30 years to Cairo, and I just couldn't stand it. It's so loud. It's so noisy.
Crowded.
I just couldn't. It's amazing, right?
Right. Your story reminds me of somebody who came. I grew up in Lagos, in Nigeria. It's
Mm.
almost like Cairo, everywhere crowded. It's like a football game just ended on the streets. Everybody there. And then my friend from Kenya, that was a quieter place, came and said, "What's going on here? I'm almost feeling lost." Even the whole act of walking down the street was something else. Because I was always saying, "Okay, where is this guest? Where is this guest?" Because she was always very
Yeah,
prepared.
I
You
know.
know how to
And
navigate.
in Cairo, people, I mean, it's very crowded and full of cars in the
Right.
streets of Cairo, but people use the horn all the time, non-stop.
Yes.
Really, non-stop.
Yeah. It's something in Lagos. In fact, one of the things I noticed when I came to the US is that what's going on? Nobody's using the horn because
Yeah,
in Lagos it was always pa pa pam pa pa pam,
exactly,
and
non-stop.
and people were supporting it, by shouting. Did you hear the horn? Get
Yeah,
out of the way!
yeah. So I know. It's amazing that
Yeah.
how we relate to space.
Okay. All right. What's the other experience, and where did it take place?
Yeah, the second experience again in Denmark, it's about grief this time. And I was attending the funeral of a friend's father, and it was in the church. The church service was deeply moving as my friend and his siblings delivered kind of very heartfelt speeches about their father, bringing almost everyone to tears, including myself. And following the service, we were invited to the family's house for
Yeah.
drinks, and where beer and snacks were served. And that struck me as ill-mannered because I was raised to believe that grief should be expressed with sadness,
Yeah.
tears, and seriousness. So in Egypt, it's a cultural practice for women in particular to express their grief openly during funerals. They often scream and wail and showcase their sorrow. And this loud display of emotion is not just a personal reaction, but actually a collective one, because it reflects the profound sadness, or it's supposed to reflect the profound sadness shared within the community. So many people in Egypt will refrain from eating or engaging in any kind of pleasurable activities in public as a means of showing their grief and showing the intensity of their loss. So my experience in Denmark was so different, but again, it made me later appreciate and even respect the varied ways in which we express grief and
Okay.
loss.
Right. Again, your story reminds me the first time I traveled to Kenya, and we were traveling a distance for a
Mhm.
funeral. And then suddenly they said, "Oh, let's stop here and eat." I said, "Eat? Eat what? Aren't we going to a funeral?" They said, "No, we have to eat." I said, "I don't understand. Let's go to the funeral." And no, we had to stop. And people were drinking beer before the occasion itself.
Before
Even
the
on
service.
our way back, we stopped again. I said, "Now, what did we do? Did we go for a funeral, or did we just have a nice time on safari, going to eat and all that?"
Exactly.
It was a totally
Exactly.
different experience. So I share, part of what you
But
have just
still,
said.
it's still in my case, it's
Yes.
grief was in Egypt was associated with loudness,
Yes.
like scream and wail and yeah, and refrain from eating and all of that drinking. Definitely not beer.
No, this my experience was that people stop before and after. you know, to
Yeah,
have their beer.
so I was really amazed. But then I realized that later that this is okay. I mean, the same in the UK, but I was domesticated by that time that I moved to the UK.
You know, some of these
What do you
things,
think?
you know, the main idea behind this program is to showcase how people live in other areas. You know, it's not a place to say, oh, this is not good or this is not, it's just how they live, you know, and that's you learn to respect, you know, like when
Exactly.
we stopped over to have our people had their beer. I couldn't complain. There was no basis for me to complain. I said, okay, if that is what makes you puts you in the mood to go for a funeral. If beer will help, okay, go ahead and have your beer.
I think you learn to respect differences. That's what it is, especially if you
Correct.
live in more than one culture.
Correct. You learn to actually you put it nicely. Learn to respect, you know, differences, and then know that this world is not just one way of doing things, which is what this, you know, forum is all about. All
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
I know that the experiences shocked you moving from Cairo, you know, back
To
to
Copenhagen,
Denmark.
which is the other extreme, and
And
then the
the other
UK.
extreme, yeah, yeah. Like, if there's a crowd, really, honestly, in Lagos, if there's a crowd moving, you feel a little bit comfortable, very secure that okay, nothing can happen, you know. And so
Yeah, I don't know. I can't cope with this sense of with this hustle and bustle of the city like Cairo anymore. Honestly, I can't cope. Even the heat, I mean, I start to feel like I can't stand the heat, but now I'm back to the Middle East, so I have to cope with the
oh,
heat. Mm.
is there anything that has happened in the since you moved to UAE that we need to know? Anything, any striking thing, any change, for instance?
Not much. I mean, I think we have this shared experience about weddings because I thought that weddings here are mixed gendered, but
Okay.
I was told that no, when you go for a wedding, I have to sit with women only,
Yeah.
kind of in a women only hall, and men will be in a different place. So I thought this is weird. So, but otherwise, I mean, because in Egypt you have mixed gendered weddings, so I didn't understand, but I understand that this is kind of the part of their culture, which is okay. But otherwise, everything seemed kind of familiar.
Okay, right. I told you about my experience in Kuwait, you know, the wedding where I didn't see the bride. And I was wondering, okay, why are we having a wedding
Where, yeah,
without the
where,
bride? What kind? Until
I know, I
until it was
know.
explained to me that, okay, they are somewhere else you can mix because of culture and religion. I said, okay, I didn't know because I've never attended a wedding without a bride. It was a surprise to
Yeah, yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So,
Okay,
yeah.
right. I want to thank you very much, you know, for your time. I know it's quite late over there. You know, I think we have
No, it's
9 hours between
8:15.
us.
It's
Thanks
okay.
again. And I would like to invite any person who wants to share his or her experience. The email address is crossculturalexperiences with S at the end, crossculturalexperiences at gmail, you know, .com. I'll
Oh,
get it.
excellent.
Yes, I'll
Mm,
get it. And then we can share experience. It's always amazing, you know, when people share
absolutely.
their
Mm.
experiences, you know, across
We can
cultures.
write a book about it.
Yeah. I,
We can put
now,
everything in books.
now that is the professor in you talking.
Yeah.
All right, all right. Thank you again, and have
Pleasure.
a beautiful rest of the day.
Okay, thank you.